Welcome to another episode of Top Lines and Tales, your weekly livestock podcast, and as always we'd like to thank our sponsors Harbro for their continued support. This week we have one of the most respected breeders of cattle and sheep, and probably one of the most respected stockmen in Scotland, Jimmy Wilson from Barnyards in Mintlaw. And Jimmy, your name gets mentioned quite frequently on Top Lines and Tales, so it's great to have you here.
Right.
And Jimmy, I'm right in thinking you've probably retired from farming now, have you? Or you still running the farm?
No, I sold the last of my land just 6 months ago.
Okay.
More or less retired now, but we still have a farmhouse and 20 acres of land because my daughter stays there, and there's two granddaughters there, and one of them is really keen on the sheep, and they've got Charolais sheep, so I'm still across there keeping her right and things like that. So
I'm sure you do keep them right, and what a great mentor they have in yourself, Jimmy. And your history in the livestock world goes back a long time, and I believe you worked with a man who's also frequently mentioned on this podcast, Gordon Blackstock.
I did. I started off there, yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about Blackstock? Obviously, he was in Angus and Shorthorns, and a very well-respected man, I believe.
Yeah, he was a bit of a character, Gordon. But he was with Cecil Moore's originally, and then I remember when the Bapton herd transported from Surrey, I think it was, by train up to Cairnbroggy.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been, I don't know, in the 50s maybe.
It was 50s, yeah.
And then he took on the farm at Den End of Strichen, and that was where I went to work for him, and he got some Suffolk sheep, but that's why I landed there with him. But then sadly he was killed in a motor accident, of course, so I only had about a year and a half with him.
Okay.
But he was a bit of a character, a great stockman.
What age would you be when you went there straight from school?
Oh no, that was when I got married.
Okay.
I wasn't very old then, 22 or something. So that was what got me started in the Suffolks.
But he was a great man, wasn't he? As you said, and the Bapton herd, of course, were fantastic. And he was one of the men that instigated bringing in the polled Shorthorns into the country. You'd have had Shorthorns,
yeah, he was. Well, it was the Den End herd that I was with, of course.
Okay.
And he bred some fantastic cattle. He was well known over the whole world, really. Mm-hmm. And he had a great way with cattle as well. If there was a awkward beast, he would take it, and somehow or other he could just handle it.
Good.
No, he was a tremendous stockman. And that was the year he showed that bull Den End Glen Lake, which was, I think he was a ton. That was about the first short hunt to be over a ton in weight. And a lot of people said he was too big, but he wasn't. When you see him nowadays, he wouldn't have been very big.
It's funny, isn't it, when we go back to some of those forward-thinking guys like that, when everybody was going for the little cattle going to Argentina, there were one or two that realised that the breed wasn't really functional without getting a bit more size back in.
Yeah. Okay. He was killed, of course. Everything had to be sold up, and I think that year we bought this Suffolk sheep in Edinburgh, Benacre King Kong, we called him.
Okay.
I think he was a top price lamb at 700. Mm-hmm. And he had a bit of a dark tail on that, but he bred all right, but it was a new flock, of course, so we just had hardly time to get going. But when he sold him in Aberdeen at the dispersal, he was sold for £1,000 as a shearling.
Right, okay.
And, that would be 56 years ago, maybe. Mm-hmm. And that was a top price shearling ram at that time.
And then, as you said, that got you into Suffolk. Well, Did you pick a few of those up from that dispersal?
I had a ewe that I was gifted from Gordon Blackstock.
Okay.
And I bought another couple, I think, and that got me started in the Suffolks.
Okay.
And then, of course, I ended up at Drumtilbo about a year after that, and with a bit of success there. It was one of the better flocks at the time, Mike.
Whereabouts is that, Jimmy? What was that?
Bill Bruce. Bill Bruce at Drumtilbo.
Okay.
He's in the Charolais world now. He's Balmile Charolais now.
Of course, yep.
But that was after it was sold up the sheep. So I was there twice actually, and I'd always wanted to go and farm on my own. That was always my ambition. And of course, I decided to go back and back home here and start up my own. And while I was there, we had a couple of Highland Championship and the top price in Edinburgh. But he had a couple of shepherds in between me, and it wasn't very successful, so he decided to disperse them.
Okay.
So I went back for 18 months, probably. It was 18 months, I think I agreed. Bill was president of the society at that time.
Okay.
So I built the flock up and won the Gold Cup, and I think we had maybe the top price in Edinburgh that year. The Drumkilwood Duke, I think it was called. It sold to Willie Laurie.
Okay.
I think it was 1,500 guineas or something like that. My memory's just not as good as it was.
But we're talking, what, 70s here, in the early 70s maybe?
Yeah, that's when it was. Yeah. It was, it'll be exactly 51 years ago.
Okay.
Because my second daughter was born down there. That's how I remember. So, anyway, but the flock, I remember, but they would average, and they thought they might average, something like 50 or 60 pounds or guineas at that time, and I think they averaged about 160, which was a fantastic price. I think the top price due was 350 or 340. But anyway, Bill, he said to me, well, if I bought anything, he would give me it at the half price. Or was it, or maybe for nothing, I forget. I think it was maybe half price. So, of course, I bought 3. And then after the sale, he says, well, I only meant you to buy 1. And I didn't have much money, but then Bill very kindly said, well, I'd had twice as much for his sheep as he expected, type of thing. So he gifted me the 3 ewes, and that was 3 of the better ewes. 2 of them did a lot of good. I won the Highland with a ewe lamb that I bought. The next, one of them didn't do much good, but the other 2 was the base of my flock, and that was a lot of my success was from there on.
Okay, and that would be the Bridgetown flock, of course. So that's roughly when you started then, back then.
1966, my flock. That was when Gordon Blackstock was killed. That's when it was established. But I didn't do much the first year or 2 until after the Drumkilwood flock. So.
And of course, you're in amongst a nest of good breeders in about that area that you are there, and a lot of them all came to the fore. Would be some of those would have the same foundations as yourself, or the Muresks and such like.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of good breeders up in Scotland that time. There was Scrine and Willie Porter and the Barnes flock was a renowned flock, and then the Mayers and Muresk flock. But that was it. And that was the Donnan flock was one of the better flocks.
Okay.
But that was just the time for the Fowry and the Cairns flock started just around that time as well.
The boys between you that ruled the Suffolk world for a long, long time after that, didn't you? But as you said, started with some good grounding and good ground as well, some good ground around you. Well,
we did. It was the area for Suffolk sheep, but sadly they're nearly all gone. There's not many left. But I remember, well, I had a lorry, and I used to take for the Fowry sheep, the Cairns rams, and Sandy Campbell, the Captain flock. I used to take them in my lorry down to Stoneleigh, and I think a few years we had about half the money out of Stoneleigh came out of my lorry.
Yeah. So, and talking, of course, as he went on there, they went from hundreds to thousands, the trade, and there was a lot of money being made in Aberdeenshire out of the Suffolks, wasn't there?
Well, there was. I mean, and it was real money then. I mean, money. It was, £1,000 bought quite a lot.
Cool.
Doesn't buy much now, but and a lot of genuine breeders was, I think, then. I mean, I'll be slated for saying this, but I mean, sadly, some of the breeds have got in just money men, as I would say, really, and not what I would call real breeders, but and of course, well, we've moved on to AI and embryo transfer and everything like that. In some ways, it's been a good thing, but other ways, I think it's been a bad move.
Certainly changed the job, and getting even more serious now when you see some of these people with 15 ewes are turning out 200 lambs a year, and it's narrowing the gene pool right down, isn't it?
Well, I was on the council of Suffolk Sheep Society for about 28 years, and I'm afraid I always fought against it being allowed without any restriction. I always believed that before you should flush a ewe or a cow, whatever, there should have been proven some sort of breeder to be, it's a lot of people are in for financial gain rather than the breed, I think.
Very true.
And I still believe that should be today, because a lot of ewe lambs are even flushed now, and heifers and things, and there's no record of how much the breed or anything. Like, if it had been, I think it should always be proven breeders. It's gets into a flushing program. Yeah.
I spoke to Keith Jameson not so long ago, and Keith advocated exactly the same thing. He said the sheep should know, because he said you can be breeding from ewes with no milk, and that's a genetic fault too, when they're not actually rearing their own lambs.
Well, I think as one breed is a problem with that, and that would be the reason for it, because I believe they're prone to mastitis, and a lot of these ewes are being flushed, which I think is totally wrong, because it'll catch up with them someday, I reckon.
That's just my opinion. I think it might be doing already, but we won't go down that route too far, because I have a lot of loyal listeners on here. And I'm just going to mention Harborough for a second. It was David Mackenzie. I think he said you were a great mentor to him when he was a young man there. And Harborough fitted right in, didn't they, in that Aberdeen Suffolk scene? They started to put the feed out there and help you guys, I suppose.
Yeah, well, Harborough have done a lot for the pedigree world, really, as far as feeding is concerned, and the rations and things, and I think that they've got it about right, I would say, and a man I think it helped them a lot would have been John Robertson from the Rowett. Mm-hmm. He did a lot in rations and health and things, and sheep and animals, and between them they have come up with, well, one of the best rations I would think that you could find in the country. I mean, there's other companies probably just as good now, but Harborough would have been the instigator of that, and I think it was mainly maybe through Mayors at Muresk who did a lot of experiments, I think, with them and that. It would been a big benefit to the pedigree world, I think, Harborough.
We've had John Robertson from the Rowett on this podcast before, and he advocated very much that same thing. But it was those big, stronger sheep, wouldn't they be, coming from Aberdeenshire, coming down to the sales down in the south there, and a lot of that, well, it picked up the trade for Harborough, I think, by the fact that you guys were breeding stronger sheep, and therefore must be the feeding. But there is something in the ground in Aberdeenshire that'll breed sheep bigger. Jimmy, would you say that?
Yeah, well, there is, but there's a bit in the stock, a fair bit in the stockman as well, I think, because Aberdeenshire and the north of Scotland is always, no matter where it is, they've always went for stronger, but more powerful animals, whether it be cattle or sheep or whatever, rather than what they did in the south. And I'm not sure it's always been the right thing to do, because Suffolk's got to the stage that they got too strong boned and lost a bit of favour through that. And I think they need to watch themselves even today, because they still need to remember it's a commercial man at the end of the day, and he's got to land these big bone sheep. I know that I was in for that as well when I was improving them, but sheep weren't nearly as strong boned 40 years ago as what they are now. And really, I don't think there's really a lot of need for it. It's the body and the flesh. That's what the sheep's there for, to produce meat, really, in the bones and heads. Not a lot of good to the butcher.
I think if we go down that route a little bit further, there was a bit of a backlash, wasn't there, from the stronger bone ones, and one or two commercial men came in, and the likes of James Alexander and these boys came in with it, with almost a different type, a bit finer boned and more of a commercially minded thing. But they've got to watch it that they're not going back down that route again.
Well, that's right. I mean, there's a few of these lads, and they're very able, and a man I think will maybe transform the breed a bit is Willie Ingram. To me, he's got some lovely Suffolks, and what the commercial man is looking for. Now, I mean, they've got tremendous bodies and carcass on them, and they've plenty bone, and they've nice heads. They don't have the heads of the other. I think it's just a pity that they couldn't maybe. The breed couldn't maybe hook up with Willie and get a bit of his blood into the Suffolk, and I think it would be an advantage, because for me anyway, I mean, I'm a bit of a dinosaur maybe in the breed, but I think that's the kind of sheep that they want to be breeding, something to suit the commercial man, because at the end of the day, that's your main customer.
Sure. And we've had the Logie Derno boys on the podcast, and they do run their own type of sheep up there, don't they? They've got their own breeds of sheep, I believe, sort of the Logies and the Dernos and various things. But able men, the top of their game. But as you said, their commercial market, they're selling a lot of tops, and they know where their commercial man is and what he needs.
Exactly. Yeah. They're one of the ablest breeders in the country at the moment, I think, as far as commercial sheep is concerned. Yeah,
certainly agree with that. And just going back to those days, of course, you had the boys down in the south. My next door neighbour, John Sinnott, and there was Robert Hume and John Sherritt and Roger Weaver. They were a bit of a bunch of crowd of boys down there, but I think you were a bunch of rogues together. To be fair, it was a bit of a party time, wasn't it?
Well, yeah. Well, I wouldn't think there was any rogues among them, was there?
Well, they're probably all.
I know what you mean, but no, I mean there was that pocket of good breeders, and there was other pocket in Yorkshire at one point. But, it's amazing. Well, when I started in the sheep, it was Ipswich the place to go for the stock ram.
Good,
and then it moved to Edinburgh, and now it's moved to Ireland type of thing. It's amazing how it's moved around in 60 years' time, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe come back to you. And I'm just going to mention one ram that holds a place marker, I think, in the breed, and that was Pankymore Prelude, who I think was 23 or 4,000 or something. And wasn't his breeding in behind you there? There's a bit of a story there, wasn't there?
Yeah, well, John Sherritt came to me. He bought a few gimmers from me, and he used to come up, stay a few days, him and his wife Janet and that, and he would always buy maybe one gimmer. And we'd always a bit of haggle because I always wanted my best one, but I was never in favour of selling the best ones. But he maybe got the second or third best one. But anyway, this time he had a bit of bad luck with this one, and he lost her and got nothing. And he was back the next year, so there was a ewe run in with two late ewe lambs, and I said, well, you can pick one of them, which he did. So next year came round, and the ewe lamb was still with me, and it was stupping time, and I said, well, he said, will you stop her now? And I said, okay. So I switched, ram do you want? So I had a grey hill ram that paid a bit for it. So he said, okay, put her in with him. So that was fine. One lunchtime I had my ewes in the pens doing something with them. And or the rams, I forget now, but the ewes was just in the next field or vice versa. And when I came out, this in Stockton Sir John jumped the fence and was in with the ewes. And of course, the only ewe to be topped was this ewe at John Sherritt's. So it was topped with the Stockton Sir John instead of the Greyhill sheep. And of course, it was left to me. So John said, well, you better lamb it now. So, well, it was lambed with me. And so it was with me. That was it. What happened, it was Pankymore Prelude. She had a single ram lamb. And once he was weaned, he went down to John. And he had a lot of fun with him. And yeah, he was... went on to be a very famous sheep, so that was the story. It was
okay.
A lot of other stuff. It was just a bit of luck that he was ever conceived, really.
Well, he was a tremendous sheep. I remember him well, and just won just about everything before him. And as he said, he broke the record back then of the trade, and then the record started going, then didn't they? And the prices started rocketing year on year up to 20, 30s, 40s, 70,000. It was it got a time there where everybody was after the top genetics, and there were a few money boys coming in there underpinning that from Ireland and various places.
Yeah, well, that's right. I think it all went back really to Battle Hill Connor, and that was sheep that I bought from Stewart's at Battle Hill, and he really put a stamp in my flock, and it was, well, he was he was a grandfather at Prelude, so and he was a tremendous sheep and the cheapest top that ever I had. So
it's often the way, isn't it? The cheaper ones that do breed, and you went on, Jim. I know you had some good prices and what have you, and you went on and dispersed the flock, I think, at some stage, and some of your ewes breeding would have gone into a few others.
Yeah, well, maybe sadly it was foot and mouth years, 2000, and I sold the flock privately.
Okay.
And looking back in hindsight, I maybe, which I was planning to do to start with, but it was a foot and mouth, and unfortunately the purchaser didn't just make the best of a job of the flock. But there was quite a lot of ewes around in that. But I was a wee bit sad about that, but never mind, these things happen.
Indeed.
But I was going to... sorry, I could maybe tell you a wee bit about Battle Hill Cannon. That was...
Sure.
Well, he was sire of the year for 3 years. I got asked to judge the Kelso show, and that was after the Edinburgh sale, so it was sort of mixture of ram lambs that was there, because the best was all gone. And there was about 10 or 12 ram lambs, and they were a bit of a mixture. And there was this smallest one in the class. And I always remember going back to Gordon Blackstock. That was one thing he said to me, and I often remember about it. If you're struggling to make your mind up when you're judging, imagine you get to pick of them for nothing to take home with you. And he says, you make your mind up like that.
Well done.
And I thought, well, this little lamb's the only lamb I would take home out of this bunch. So I put him first. And some of my shepherd pals criticised me badly for it. Anyway, I went away for lunch with William Stewart, and as you do, you visited one or two stands, and when we got back, it was kind of quite good form, and I had bought this sheep for £220. So that was fine. Well, I wanted to put him to the Dunn's show the next week, so he kept him then. Well, he was last in his class, I think, there. Anyway, I took him home. I met Kevin on the bridge with him, or thereabout, took him home. And poor Willie's dead now, but he always denied it, and I always said so. After a few days, when I put him in the use, he had a white spot in his head, which was kind of proud about. So I took him out first year, and I had a 900, 600, and 150 for them. I always remember that. So next year, he got most of the ewes, because I could see he was going to breed. And that was when he was sire of the year, and the top price was 5,000.
Yeah.
And there was one in the early 70s. I went to, I think Sims show was that year, and I won every one with different sheep. All by Battle Hill Cannon.
Wow. So okay. He was a...
And that was the only reason I bought him, because, Blackstock had said, just think that you get him for nothing. And I've told a few people that to do that when they're judging it.
Mm-hmm. Very wise word. A lot of judges listening to this program, obviously, and take that on board. That's wise words. It's something I've never heard before, to be fair, and that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And then, Jimmy, you went on. We'll move from the sheep. You went into the Charolais cattle. As you said, stronger Charolais from Aberdeenshire there, and a demand for them. Still is a demand for Aberdeenshire Charolais as a Yugi herd there. When did you start that?
That was in 1990 or so. I started the Charolais. Okay. I bought a cow or two, but I never really did an awful lot with them. And then this young lad, Kevin Malarkey, came. He used to come as a schoolboy and that, and was very keen. So I gave him a job, and I said, well, I'd get some more Charolais, and he kind of looked after the Charolais. But although Kevin was good at most things, he had one or two good young lads when at that stage, and that was when we were champion at Perth at that time with the bull. The champion, male and female, that day. I couldn't believe it. I thought all my Christmases had come at once. Well, it was a good bull. Like it made 24,000. Was it?
Yugi legend, yeah, Perth champion, 24,000. Yeah. You're right, yeah. And where would some of your foundation cows have come from then, Jimmy? And you were well known, or just picked a few up and bred them yourself?
Well, I just bought them here and there. I went to Litchfield and things and bought cows, but the granny of the bull. No, I forget the name of it. It's a small herd, but they bought some good cattle and hadn't made a very good job of them, and they were for sale at Banbury. Mm-hmm. And this other young lad I had was Keith Johnston, was only newly passed his test. And I said, you keen for a run tomorrow or whatever? And he said, oh yeah, he'll come with me. So we left over time. I can't remember, about 4 in the morning or 3 in the morning. And we drove to Banbury, and I bought 2 cows. And he drove a little bit, but he just wasn't a lot experienced on motorways and things. And we were back home the same night, 1,000 miles round trip. That was one of the cows was no good, but that was the granny of the champion.
Uh-huh.
The best line of cows.
Okay.
I know she was like Grange. Oh God, I'm getting terrible pedigrees now.
She was called Icknield Beatrice. Because, I remember I used to do a few dispersals at that time down about Banbury, and I remember you being down there, so I think it probably the same time.
Well,
I read about them.
And then when I sold my cows when I dispersed them, the Fairhills flock Jim Muirhead bought my top price cow, 9.5, I think it was a heifer calf at foot from that same line, and that's 10 years ago, is it? And she's still going.
Okay.
And he's I don't know how many cattle he's got in his herd, descended from her. He must have a dozen females or something, because she said twins, and I don't know. I think his daughter Alison, will be a sad day when that cow has to go. But as far as I know, she's got a calf at foot again this year. And she must be 14-year-old or something now.
Yeah.
But,
a profitable cow by the sound of that, then a profitable one, and that's what it's about, is the profit, isn't it? And you went on, Jim, to be chairman of the Charolais Cattle Society 2005. Would I be right?
Yeah, that'd be about it. Yeah, I was lucky enough to be chairman, and then the honour of being president as well. And I was the same with the Suffolk Society. I was chairman and president of it as well, which was a great honour and something to look back on. But
2005, the Charolais would still be rolling on there. They went through a little bit of a lull, but they're back in now. I think the right ones anyway are still in demand.
Yeah, I think that they've got the calving. He's a bit better, and that was the thing that held them back, because there's nothing better for live weight game than a Charolais. But that was the only thing. I think there was too many breeders going to France maybe for when those. Well, you'll know what like they are in France.
I do.
Thicker, more shoulder about them and back end, and but they don't seem to worry so much over there about the calving.
No.
And but I think it still need a touch of that, maybe just through the breed, but it was maybe too much of it at one point, and I think that was one of the things that didn't help them.
I was at Major Walter. In fact, we had Major Walter from Balthick on the podcast a while back there. I think he had a Yugi Echo. Would that be? I think he was talking about, but a bull that did very well for him.
Yeah, that's right. He did. He was very easy to carve. And that he was by Goldie's Banker. That was he was an easy carving bull. That was a bull. When I judged birth that year, I think he was reserve senior, but he was the type of bull I was looking for, and he did really well for me.
Good.
That bull, Major got that son.
Yeah, Major got the son. That's right, Echo. And you dispersed the Charolais. When was that, Jimmy?
When I was 70.
Okay.
It'll be 11 years ago. So.
Wow, that puts you over 80. Okay.
I dispersed the sheep when I was 60, and it was always in my mind. And then I did the cows when I was 70, and I've missed them, but. Anyway, the age catches up, and I have a few sore bits that I would rather not have, but we can do nothing about it. I'm still here, and I'm still able to lift a glass, so it's not so bad.
That's the main thing, but it is, there has to become a time when you can't. And you obviously do a lot of judging. You'll have judged a lot of things. I remember you judging the interbreed at the Royal Highland Show, I think 2015, when you put an Angus up there, Shadwell Black Broughton for Alistair and Graham Fraser.
I did, yeah. It was a tremendous bull. I was an easy winner in my eyes.
I think it was
a great opportunity to get that. And I judged the interbreed sheep at the Royal one year, and I think it was 30 something I've never even seen before. So.
Really?
But no, I've really enjoyed my career in judging it, and also twice judged out in Melbourne.
Did you?
And Tasmania as well. So
judging sheep there, Jimmy.
Judging Suffolk sheep, yeah.
And what like would the sheep be in Australia? I know there was a time when a few Australian Suffolks came in. There are still a few Australian and New Zealand Suffolk herds about here. What like were the Suffolks down there compared to what you were used to in Aberdeenshire?
Very different, really. They were much finer on the bone. They didn't. A lot of them had very brown kind of heads, but then they were a different purpose because they were very fussy about the wool, and that was one of the criticisms of my judging, because I didn't pay much attention to wool because I wasn't experienced in the wool, and I just had to judge them as I would have done at home, like. But there was a lot of hobby breeders, but there was a lot of key. The Suffolks, as far as I know, have done quite well there again, because it changed them from black to white. They crossed them with the Bull Dorset, I think, and I actually thought the white Suffolk was better than the black-faced Suffolk, to be honest.
Certainly, there's a lot of white sheep.
But because of the black wool, of course, was the thing that held them back.
Yeah.
And
change times now when the wool's not worth so much, I know, but then we had a chap on here from the Tatty Keel flock there that were breeding their own type of white sheep, where a bit of Suffolk, bit of Texel and various things there, and in big demand, and big money in them too. And the Paul Dorset's always in the back of those.
It's always something that gets to me. I don't know why they can't utilise wool better, because it's a very natural product. And I mean, you'd think in this day and age for insulation or something like that, the wool would be, but they're trying to get away from all these synthetics and all that kind of things. But I've always thought that there was someday would pick up wool, and there was a lot of potential in it. But maybe it'll happen yet. I don't know. I still don't like those Suffolks with a lot of black wool in it. I think it's a pity they've let that into breed, because there's plenty good Suffolks that don't have black wool, and I don't see why I would criticise the society if they let the breed go down that way. I think they're taking a stand on it now, which is not pleasing some people, but I would be against a lot of black wool in sheep. I think it's
okay.
And this bare sheep as well. I don't think a sheep was ever meant to be bare wool. They were supposed to be covered with wool because they were bred for being outside and hardiness and in the hills and things like that, and I still think a sheep should be well covered in wool.
The chap that we had on the podcast had actually bred the wool off the sheep by, because he said the sheep wool was worth nothing. He bred the sheep off them, and he swore they were hardier without wool than they would have been with wool. But I'm not quite sure that would work in Scotland, maybe.
Well, if you're breeding them, I suppose you can convince yourself that anything like, but it's okay. I mean, you'll rear any sheep, but if you keep them inside and mollycoddle them, like, but you've got to think in the commercial man at the end of the day, because that's where they all end up. Like, and I'm pretty sure they would prefer them with wool, but that's just my opinion.
Certainly there's not much wool left on a lot of these Texels now, that's for sure, but there's another controversial point that probably shouldn't go down, and the breed of choice, you said to the top of the call here that you're still at home in the farmhouse there and kept a bit of land, and your granddaughters have now gone into Charolais, is that right?
Well, I bought them. The youngest one was a 9-year-old, and wanted a sheep or two. They had a wee bit of land where they were, and I bought them. I went to Lanark and bought them a couple of Charolais Gimmers, because I thought they might be easier lambed and things, and that's where it all stemmed from. And then, well, the one the Highland Show was a yearling new 3 years ago, was it maybe? Okay. So they've been showing at the Highland for the last, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years. And they've always done quite well. They've had a few red tickets, and they're never far away. But when Willie Ingram's there, I'm afraid Willie's a hard man to get past. At one point I said it was my ambition to beat him, so we did beat him 3 years ago, but Willie says it'll be difficult to do it again.
And what are your two granddaughters called? Let's give them a shout out then. Is it the two granddaughters that showed them, or just the one?
No, there's two. There's Ailey, who is an ROV pilot now. She's just 23 or so, and she's really keen on the sheep. Well, she's on a boat for a month at a time, so she's a month away and a month at home. And the youngest one is Erin, who's just coming up for 21, and she's also due to have a baby in about a week's time. So,
brilliant.
So that's another generation.
Another generation of you there, and they have had such obviously great mentor in yourself there with the Charolais there. And you said they won a few prizes. Just where did those foundation ewes come from, Jimmy? You said down in Lanark. What breeding was in there?
One came from a guy. God, was it McHardy or no? It was Mick something he called them. And the other one came from Sheena Coggle up in Orkney. Okay. So, but there's quite a bit of Logie-Durno breeding in them now, because Willie was kind enough to let them get an AI'd there first year or two, and had 2 or 3 Logie-Durno rams, like so.
Okay.
So there's quite a bit of Logie-Durno breeding in them, okay. Because I think it's a bit hard to get past Logie-Durno on the Charolais sheep.
Yeah, and other breeds, as you say, as well. So no, that's good. No, well, that's great. You're still keeping your handy there. As I said, it's a good mentor for yourself, and you still get out to the shows, Jimmy, and out and about, and get where you can.
Yeah, I get out to shows, and I still go to Tainston Market, not every week, but some weeks and that, and I buy some cattle for for a chap that bought part of my farm, like so.
Okay.
So no, I still keep the interest.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't much else interest, so I'm too old to get interested in women nowadays. So.
I'm sure you'd still chase him if you get half a chance, Jimmy. No, that's an absolute pleasure to talk to you. As I said, a man steeped in a lot of history in the breed, and obviously famous for the things that you've done and have done particularly well. And somebody, as I said before, that everybody respects and looks up to. And I'm sure a lot of people will be interested and listening to the knowledge that you've put over for us this afternoon.
Well, I don't know. I've had a great life with the pedigree world, and some like you, some great nights in the back of the lorry and things, and met some tremendous people along the way, and both doesn't matter, some great shepherds around as well, some very knowledgeable lads I've met, and I've learned a lot from a lot of them. So, no, I have no regrets. I'd like to do it all over again.
I'm sure, but it's great that you are passing that knowledge on down to the youngsters, and I know, as you said, a couple of young shepherds you've had with you, and I know you've helped a lot of young ones along the way, and including David Mackenzie, who said, be very helpful to him and lent him a few rams and such like, and I think that's commendable that we can keep putting a bit back to the generations.
Yeah, well, I like people, and I don't mind giving them any of my experience if I can at all, like the knowledge that I've got. I think that's what we should all be doing, the older generation, because it's the younger ones that's coming behind us. They're the future. I have a lot of faith in them. I have a lot of good young people around, so I know they get slated a bit sometimes, but I have a lot of faith in the young generation.
No, brilliant. Well, that's something that we try and do on Top Lines and Tails, is take a bit of that older knowledge and pass it on. And certainly I believe we've done that today, Jimmy. I really appreciate your time, taking your time to talk to me on Top Lines and Tails, and I think everybody else will appreciate it too.
Oh, well, I hope I haven't spoken too much nonsense.
And you'll be down at the Highland, Jimmy. We'll try and catch up with you and get a dram when you're there.
Very good.
All right.
We'll look forward to that. Okay, Andy.
All the best to you. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Top Lines and Tails, your weekly livestock podcast. And as always, we're thankful to our sponsors, Harborough. And if you're looking to get your pedigree stock ready for the summer shows, then get in touch with Harborough to find out what their feeds could really do for you. I mean, Harborough was founded on top quality feeds for show sheep, and it feeds a lot of champions throughout the country. So thank you to Harborough for your continued support. Look them up, please, on the internet or on social media, or contact your local representative. And while you're on social media, don't forget to look out the Top Lines and Tails Facebook page, where there's a whole community there, and you'll find hundreds of photographs and pictures and articles and links and everything to back up this and previous podcasts.